along to the next instalment of our January content campaign, which we are hosting in association with our friends and partners at Landlord. We're so proud of this groundbreaking campaign, which we are calling Digitisation of the Landlord Lifecycle. And we are working through the lifecycle of a landlord, showing where landlords can use digital tools and products to really enhance their landlord life. And we're also looking at how the property sector itself is becoming increasingly more digitized. And this is very appropriate for today's instalment. We are in the acquisition phase today and all this week, and we've broken it down to pre-acquisition, acquisition, ownership, management and growth, and exiting. Those are the four phases of the landlord life cycle. And as I said, today we are in acquisition. And this is the legal process and everything you have to do to acquire a property and get your name on the Land Registry for that property. And it's very timely because we've heard just this week that estate agency commentators are saying that the conveyancing process for residential property buying and selling of will be fully digitized by 2025. Well, I wonder what my guest thinks about that, because I'm so delighted to be joined by a wonderful gentleman who does all our conveyancing and remortgaging, and that is the lovely Mr. Alan Zeffertt of Anthony Gold Solicitors. So Alan, it's so lovely to have you now talking on Property Tribe. So what do you make of this whole digitisation of the conveyancing process?
Well, thank you, Vanessa. It's lovely to be here as well. Certainly, there have been a lot of changes in digitisation of conveyancing services over the past few years. And I think what has perhaps understandably had the biggest impact has been COVID-19, because suddenly all conveyancing lawyers and other office staff found themselves in a position in March 20 or whatever it was, that of course they couldn't go into their offices. And of course that forced everybody to work electronically and remotely on their computers from home. So what effectively has happened since that time is, and my firm, and I think this is common to most firms that carry out conveyancing services, is they've gone paperless, almost paperless anyway, never quite paperless with legal documents. So the whole conveyancing process is now done typically by email and scanned documents. So electronic conveyancing, if you like. So the documents that will typically be sent to someone buying a property will be, all the property information forms and the Land Registry titles for them to read. And when it comes to signing documents, there'll be a contract to sign, and there'll be deeds of transfers, which have to be signed and witnessed. Those typically will be a deed of transfer and a mortgage deed. Now, what you said was interesting, Vanessa, because I think the Law Commission and the Law Society and the Land Registry and probably various other bodies are constantly looking into digitising conveyancing services. But where we are at the moment is it's still not acceptable to use digital signatures on all legal documents when it comes to the sale and purchase of land, because there are special rules about those transactions. For other contracts which are not to do with land, digital signatures are usually fine, provided you can keep an audit trail and demonstrate that it's a genuine signature and the person signing digitally intended to sign it. But with conveyancing, you still need the old-fashioned, if you like, position whereby if you have to have a document signed and witnessed, the signatory and the witness have to be physically present at the same time in the same place, well, almost in the same place, because what's happened, of course, since the government restrictions are you have to socially distance. So what I've done on a few occasions is I've had people come round, or I've gone round to other people's houses with a document, stood at the doorstep and signed it, handed it inside to the person who's sort of 3 meters away. They witness my signature, give it back to me, and it's done. So typically that is what people are having to do at the moment. But apart from that, it tends to be an electronic process. And, you know, the days of people going into sort of bricks and mortar offices, typically the high street firms to get their conveyancing done, are those days. They're not over, but they're certainly numbered, because people now have a choice where they can go online and find lawyers or conveyancers anywhere, really.
Indeed. And you know, we are seeing that the Land Registry is becoming digitised. It's a massive project. It's going to take years and years and years. And I think the Land Registry is such a crucial prime mover in residential property sales in the UK, because it's very robust. We have a proven legal system. It's very trusted. People do get their name on the title. These are all things that really contribute to how popular UK property is, isn't it?
Indeed. I mean, the Land Registry has been leading the way for probably 30 years now, almost, in terms of, you know, computerized land registry titles. I think almost all land in the UK is computerized now. And the Land Registry have been, well, until COVID anyway, they were very sort of quick and efficient in dealing with turnaround of title registrations, although COVID slowed them up. So there is a bit of a delay sometimes, but you can now go onto the Land Registry portal and call up a title, anyone's title, almost instantly, which is an amazing service. And if, when you're scrutinizing the title, there are documents referred to, again, you can usually get copies of those onto the portal immediately. Occasionally, with certain older documents, sometimes you might see historic conveyances from the 19th century or something containing restrictive covenants, where the documents lodged were on the large sort of A3 or old-fashioned sort of paper, so they haven't actually scanned it onto the system. You have to apply and they'll send it to you by post, which can take a few days. But certainly obtaining titles is very quick. When it comes to when someone's bought a property, you then have to register their title, and that is done digitally. That's done by using typically a form called an AP1, which is downloaded onto the portal together with certified copies of all the documents. So you no longer need to send originals to the Land Registry. And again, the Land Registry will then, they do take several weeks and sometimes can take several months to complete the registration, depending on the complexity of the transaction. But yes, again, all that is now done digitally, and conveyancing firms use different digital providers to do their searches and to make their applications.
Well, I think you've kind of alluded there, really, what a great resource the Land Registry is to investors in terms of due diligence. And, you know, if you're thinking of buying a property, you can download the title, see if there's any, you know, negative covenants on it, or all of these kind of things, like weird things like agricultural ties and all those kind of good stuff. So yes, it's a brilliant resource for investors. Now, Alan, we're kind of couching this really towards, you know, newcomers to the sector. Most of them will have purchased their own home and gone through the process of acquiring a property for their own residential use. There's really not much difference between that and buying a buy-to-let property, is there?
Not really.
In terms of the legal process.
Indeed, I mean, it's the same legal process, whatever type of residential property you're buying. Obviously, as you allude to, the buy-to-let investor is more likely to have already bought their own property, and so be a little bit more savvy and you know, used to the conveyancing process, if you like, as opposed to a first-time buyer. But in terms of you know, what you're looking for if you're advising an investor, a buy-to-let investor, partly depends on whether it's a freehold or more usually a leasehold property with leaseholds there tends to be some more complexity and more documents to read. But, you know, you would be, for example, if you were looking at a lease of a flat, you would want to be very careful to make sure that the investor is going to be able to sublet the property on assured short hold tenancies, for example. So tenancies typically under 3 years. There may be restrictions in some leases against doing that. So that sort of thing. Also, you might have a buy to let investor buying through the vehicle of a limited company, which would then mean that you're going to have to do some additional due diligence on the company itself. The lender will require a deed of guarantee from the director. And the registration process is a little more complicated because not only do you have to register the title at the Land Registry, but you also have to register within 21 days at company's house, so that anyone searching against the company will see that there is a mortgage registered against that company. But as you say, basically, it's the same conveyancing process.
Yeah, you mentioned buying through a limited company and personal guarantees. We get a lot of threads started on property tribes that, you know, people seem slightly surprised to be asked this. They're not sure how to organise it or what solicitors offer the service of you know, witnessing the personal guarantee and so on. So there's that little bit nuance there, isn't there?
There is. Some people are a bit wary about personal guarantees, but if you think about it, it's no different to their buying the property in their individual name. Yeah. So they're not giving any more of a guarantee than they would be if the mortgage was in their name. What is, as you allude to, what is problematic is now lenders often say, well, there's a conflict of interest between the company and the director giving the personal guarantee, even though it may be a sole director who's got 100% of the shares of the company. So really, it's one and the same person, but they will still say, no, if you're for the personal guarantee, you've got to go off and get independent legal advice from another solicitor, which will mean the other, so you've got to make an appointment, could be on, I mean, I've done this several times on Zoom, for example. You've got to make an appointment to have a sort of face-to-face or virtual meeting, which might take half an hour, when the solicitor will go through the mortgage offer, go through the terms of the guarantee, explain that to the client, who will then sign the guarantee, and the solicitor will have to sign a certificate of independent legal advice and then send that back to the mortgage lender. So that's the process. It can be difficult finding solicitors willing to do that. However, and people not necessarily working from their offices. And also, frankly, some solicitors don't want to be bothered with what they regard as a fairly small case, because compliance for solicitors is quite strictly, it is very strict these days. And even if you just do a small job like that, you've still got to open a file, do your ID checks and verifications on the client, so you'll know your client. So you've got to go through all that palaver, get the file opened, just to give what effectively is a short piece of advice and give an undertaking to a mortgage lender and send it back, and then the case is over. So some solicitors are charging differing amounts, and sometimes clients are a bit puzzled as to, well, why is the solicitor wanting to charge, I don't know, £200 or £300 for simply speaking to me for half an hour and signing a piece of paper?
But you've hit there on another aspect of the digitisation, which is being able to do a face-to-face over Zoom. And again, this, you know, the whole thing about digitisation is it doesn't have to be location specific. And very often somebody will come onto Property Tribes and say, I'm buying a house in Manchester, I need to know a Manchester solicitor. But in fact, you can actually work with a solicitor anywhere in the UK now, because obviously when you're doing your searches and all the other bits and pieces you do as part of what you do, Ellen, you've got access to all of the same portals and everything that every solicitor has in the UK. So it's the digitisation has taken away the kind of location aspect of working with solicitors, I think.
I think you're right. It has mostly taken that away. So in all cases, you can deal with a conveyancing transaction wherever you are geographically. You don't need to be near the client. There are a few occasions when sometimes having a local office to where the client lives might be an advantage. So if a client is selling a property and has got a whole pile of deeds and documents, some of which they think might be relevant, they like to sort of drop it into the office. Or some people, if they're going to have to print a hard copy of a document, they may not have a printer, say, so they may say, oh, can I come into your office, you print it for me, and have someone in the office witness it. So there are occasions, even in the sort of digital age, where the old-fashioned way it suits some people, or people who may not be very computer savvy, or just very occasionally you get someone who wants it done the old-fashioned way through the post, believe it or not.
No,
So, but on the whole, you're right. I mean, nearly the vast majority of conveyancing now can be done by a solicitor based anywhere, really.
So, Alan, whether it's a digital conveyancing process or somebody that prefers to do it in an analog format, one top tip that I always say is, as soon as you get some documents, respond to them, turn them around as fast as you can and get them back. That's my top tip for being a successful, for going through a successful conveyancing purpose or process, or if you're doing a remortgage, as a buy-to-let investor, one of the big things that makes you attractive to buyers is that you're not in a chain, you can move fast. And, part of what I do to secure a deal is to say, I can work, I can complete in 28 days. So, we need to be on our toes when we're interacting with you, don't we?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's certainly for negotiating a good deal, speed is very important, and to be able to offer a seller or through an estate agent the ability to turn a deal around quickly is very attractive, and should enable you to negotiate a better price than you might otherwise be able to get. However, I think it is important, and something that's often overlooked is to be precise about the timetable. So you quite often get, and even estate agents don't firm up on this, you get sort of people saying, yes, I can exchange in 14 days or something like that. And then you wonder, well, what does that even mean? Because if you then don't get the contract pack, a complete contract pack of papers, if you're the buyer's solicitor, if the seller's solicitor doesn't send it to you, it takes a week before they send it out, your 14 days is already down to 7 days, and it may not be, by that stage, it's probably not viable. So you have to take into account what is a reasonable timetable for the buyer's lawyer to do all the searches, and the timing on searches can vary according to the particular local authority. So if you are, looking at speed, I would say that's fine, but make sure that, first of all, that timetable can be adhered to, and secondly, that any timetable you agree is time to run from receipt of a full contract pack of papers. Because again, if the seller's solicitor sends it out in dribs and drabs, and you still, 14 days into it, you still haven't got a full set of papers, then you're not in a position to exchange anyway.
Well, whenever I work with you, Alan, I always check in with you first to make sure that you have the capacity to run a quick transaction, because obviously your workload and your team's workload does vary. And, if you are seeking a quick transaction, if you are working to a very tight deadline, then I would recommend that you check with the solicitor that they actually have the capacity to run your case within that deadline.
No, I agree. It is a sensible thing to ask any solicitor what their capacity is, and also, you know, to check maybe with a solicitor before you finalise on your offer that it's likely that the searches and everything else can be carried out within a certain time frame.
Indeed. So I think we've covered a lot of ground, Alan. I think there was one other thing that you wanted to bring up. We've mentioned what a great resource the Land Registry is on so many levels, how it is a pivotal supporter of our property wealth in this country. And one of the things that you're very keen to stress, Alan, is the Land Registry can also help with anti-fraud measures as well, can't they?
Well, the Land Registry, yes, it does help because they are quite strict with how applications are dealt with. So they will insist that an application to the Land Registry, if it's not made by a conveyancer, so by a conveyancer I mean a licensed conveyancer, someone who's duly licensed, or a solicitor who's also obviously licensed, that if it's an individual acting in person, either selling or buying, then they will have strict ID requirements with regard to properly certified copies of ID, typically a passport or driving license, and usually 2 utility or other bills showing proof of address. So the Land Registry does give that additional safeguard, because once they've registered that title becomes a guaranteed title. It's a title that's guaranteed effectively by the state. So if they've gone and registered a fraudster, that would have serious consequences, because anyone buying on the basis of a registered title is entitled to rely on that, and therefore the fraudster might have defrauded the true owner of money, but the true owner would then have to claim compensation from the Land Registry, which has a compensation scheme as well, which is very important. So the whole system of registered land does depend upon people being able to rely upon registered titles, and therefore the Land Registry is suitably strict in checking those matters out. But it's not.
Yeah, they also have some notifications that you can sign up to, that if somebody downloads the title of your property, things like that, because we have heard of property fraud where empty buy-to-let properties have been targeted, people have had mail sent to that property, that kind of thing. So Alan and I do urge you to sign up to the anti-fraud notifications on the Land Registry. I will put a link underneath this video of how you can do that. Very simple to do, and if somebody is scanning your title or downloading it, you will get a notification. It might be something completely harmless, like you've applied for a remortgage or something like that, but you do need to know if a third party that you're not aware of is showing an interest in your property. So Alan, thank you very much for joining us on this call. It's so lovely to have you on Property Tribes. And how many years have you been conveyancing now?
Oh my gosh, too many. Well, conveyancing certainly over 30 years.
Wow. I guess this is the greatest acceleration of change you've probably seen in your business life, haven't you, with what's happened in the last 2, 3, 4 years? I
think, yeah, the speed with which everything is now done has certainly accelerated, and I think the basic conveyancing itself hasn't changed that much. Some of the forms keep changing, but yeah, the method by which it's done does change. You're quite right. So anyway, thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, no, it's been absolutely lovely.
Thanks very much.